On March 8th, a Boeing 777 took off from Kuala Lumpur. The flight was bound for Beijing. There were 239 people on board. The aircraft was a modern, long-range passenger plane, a type of aircraft designed to travel thousands of kilometers over the ocean. The departure seemed completely routine. No one knew that this would become one of the most famous aircraft disappearances in history. MH370 departed a few minutes after midnight local time. The aircraft climbed. The crew was in contact with air traffic control. The aircraft reached its planned cruising altitude. Everything seemed normal. The aircraft was following the designated route between Kuala Lumpur and Beijing. Then it reached a waypoint. Igari. This was the point where MH370 was supposed to enter the control of the next air traffic control center. Malaysian Air Traffic Control instructed the crew to contact Vietnamese Air Traffic Control. The response was brief. Good night, Malaysian 370. This became the last known radio transmission from the aircraft. A few moments later, something changed. MH370's secondary radar signal disappeared. According to the official investigation, the radar signal disappeared approximately 3.2 nautical miles after the Igari waypoint. For a normal passenger flight, this does not simply happen. The aircraft should have continued flying, but it was no longer there on the radar screen. And this is where the strangest part of the MH370 story begins. The aircraft did not simply disappear. Based on the available radar data, it continued flying, just not in the direction it was originally supposed to go. The aircraft changed course. It turned around. It flew over the Malay Peninsula. This caused its route to completely diverge from the one specified in the flight plan. Meanwhile, air traffic control still did not have a complete picture of what was happening. The aircraft was no longer where it was supposed to be, and contact had been lost. During the first hours, the search began in the South China Sea region. This seemed logical. After all, based on the last known position, if that was where they should have been looking. Aircraft were sent into the air, ships headed into the area. But the search teams did not find the aircraft. There was no large debris field. There was no obvious crash site. There was no evidence pointing to a single location. The aircraft simply did not turn up. Meanwhile, in Beijing, people were waiting. The passengers' relatives initially thought the flight was delayed. Then more and more journalists began to arrive, and cameras appeared around the airport. It became increasingly clear that something serious had happened. Authorities re-examined the available data, and that was when the story became truly strange. Based on military radar data, MH370 may have continued flying, not eastward, but westward. The aircraft may have returned over the Malay Peninsula. Then it may have continued toward the Indian Ocean. This completely changed the search area. The question was no longer where the aircraft had crashed in the South China Sea. It was how far it had continued flying. And why? Then another important piece of information emerged. Data from the satellite communication system. Certain automatic connections from MH370's onboard systems continued even after the radio and radar signals were lost. These were not data like a GPS position. They did not simply tell investigators exactly where the aircraft was, but they allowed investigators to estimate the possible distance and route of the aircraft. The data increasingly suggested that the aircraft may have continued flying for a long time. The search therefore shifted south, very far south, into a vast, remote region of the Indian Ocean. This was no longer a small search area. It was an enormous expanse of ocean. Research vessels used sonar to try to locate wreckage lying on the seabed. Aircraft scanned the surface. Satellite images were analyzed. Every small object was examined. The problem was simple. The ocean is enormous, and the Boeing could have been somewhere on the bottom of this vast area, or at least that was the assumption. During the search, several objects were recovered, but none proved to be decisive evidence. Then, more than a year later, a new clue appeared. On the island of Reunion, a piece of an aircraft wing was found on the shore. Later investigations confirmed that the piece was connected to MH370. This was the first important, direct physical evidence that parts of the aircraft had indeed reached the Indian Ocean region. But a piece of an aircraft did not reveal exactly where the aircraft was, and it did not answer the most important question either. What happened on board MH370? The official investigation examined numerous possibilities: technical failure, loss of communication systems, a change of route, human intervention, other possible scenarios. But the available evidence was not enough to establish a single explanation with certainty. This is particularly unusual in the case of a modern passenger aircraft. An aircraft like this generates enormous amounts of data: radar signals, communications, flight parameters, satellite connections, maintenance records. Yet there was a point where the information simply ran out. The aircraft continued flying, the clues became weaker and weaker. Then they stopped, and what remained was a vast ocean. The search continued for years. Multiple countries took part. Huge areas were searched. The operation became one of the largest maritime searches in modern history. But the main wreckage of MH370 was never found. Neither were the black boxes. The aircraft's exact final location could not be proven either. And that is why the story remains so extraordinary. Not because we know nothing about it, but because we know so much. We know when it took off. We know where it was supposed to fly. We know when it disappeared from radar. We know that later data suggested the aircraft may have continued flying. We know that its route changed, and we know that some pieces of the aircraft were later recovered. But the most important part of the story is still missing: the complete answer. MH370 is not simply a missing aircraft. It is an event in which almost every tool of modern technology was used to try to reconstruct the final journey of a single aircraft, with radar, satellites, sonar, aircraft, ships, and research operations worth millions of dollars. Yet the complete wreckage was never found. One passenger aircraft, 239 people, one final radio transmission, a disappearing radar signal, a changed route, and a vast ocean. At the end of the story, there was no murder scene, no collapsed building, no abandoned vehicle. Instead, there was an empty map, a point where certainty ends. That is why the story of MH370 remains open, not because there are no theories, but because there is not enough evidence to accept a single theory as the definitive answer. The aircraft disappeared, and its traces were scattered across an entire ocean. And until the main wreckage is found, one of the greatest questions remains unchanged. What really happened on board MH370 that night?